All right, we are live now. Hello, everyone. And I'm glad to see you again in 2019 with the new edition of the dev.life online sessions. So quickly introduce the channel for those who are new and may not know what's going on. This is online sessions dev.life run by Liferay, and in those we talk about things like software products that are either created by Liferay or used by Liferay, or software technologies that are relevant to the products that we use. And this is a live session where we're going to try to answer some questions. But before that, just to let you know, the guy in the corner, that's me. I'm developer advocate at Liferay. My name is Milan Yankov, and I have the honor to be the host of this session. I have some guests on this session today, which I'm going to introduce to you later on. Those are the projects some of the projects that we work on at Liferay. If you're interested to learn more about what we work on, please go to the community.liferay.com/projects. And you are here, so you figure out that we have also the meetup channel where you can sign up and be notified about future live sessions. We also run a variety of meetup groups, local Liferay user groups around the globe. So go to the meetup account to see if there is a Liferay user group next to you. If there is not, let us know and you can start one. For today's session, as for any other session, we want it to be interactive today more than ever. We are waiting for your questions as usual on the YouTube channel. There is a chat next to the video. And also on our dev.life channel on the Liferay community Slack. So use either of those to send your questions, and I will read to the guests, which today are Jorge Ferrer, who is the Vice President of Engineering and also acting as the product manager on several product teams at Liferay. Carlos Sierra, who is one of the biggest specialists on the OSGi framework that we have at the company. So he's going to be happy to answer all your OSGi related questions. Chema Basa, who is leading the front-end team. So anything front-end would probably go to him. Last but not least, Olaf Kak, who is the training manager for Europe. Unless something changed recently and I don't remember. Yeah, hey, Kate says it's okay. I'll actually let them introduce themselves in a second. And the session is called Ask Us Anything. And we are doing this to let you know that what's going on, what we're working on, what the plans are, and things like that. Now, before we start actually the questions, we already collected some questions. We're going to start with those, give you some time to actually ask more. I need to make one thing clear. This is not an online support session. So if your question is like, how do I do this with Liferay? We're probably not going to be able to answer this question. So please focus more on things like architecture processes, design decisions, anything that's related to the future and the design and the ideas behind and around the product, and we'll be happy to answer those. A second disclaimer is we all will try to do our best to answer your questions, but unless otherwise stated, please do not assume that this is an official company statement. We just want to be helpful to you guys and provide answers to the best of our knowledge. This is not to make, the goal of this session is not to make an official statement on behalf of Liferay. So keep that in mind. Okay, so with that, let's move to give everyone the opportunity to say hi. Let's start with Jorge.
Okay, thank you, Milan, and well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everybody listening, for joining. And I think you already introduced me well. Maybe I can add some facts that the first version of Liferay that I used was 1.8.5 around year 2002 or 2003. So I was one of the initial members of the community, and then I joined the company in 2006. So I've been through almost all Liferay versions.
Nice. Carlos?
Hello all. So thank you, Million, for the gentle introduction and for calling me an expert. So I don't fully agree with that statement, but I'll try to keep up. And yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I forgot to mention that you're a security expert as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So yes, as you said, I'm working now in the security team. So recently, I've been working on OAuth2 support in Liferay and also JAX-RS support in Liferay as well. It's everything related to OSGi as well. So I would be very pleased to try and answer all the questions that you might have about these topics.
Great. Jamal?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here with all of you today. As Milan said, I'm leading the front infra team and also trying to unify our front evolution throughout the company. So questions about where we're going and what do you expect or what would you like to see in the future would be very appreciated. Picking up from Jorge, trying to add some facts. Since Carlos didn't say anything, I think we joined pretty much at the same time. I think almost 6 years ago. Some would call that a good year, others maybe just a really bad one for Liferay. We'll see how down the road how it goes.
Okay, and now a voice that you probably all recognize, especially if you listen to Radio Liferay, Ola.
I'm in your head. So what changed? What changed? Hello, Olaf here. What changed is I am kind of related to training, but on a slightly different end. I am now making sure that our online training on Liferay University is well covered and is being extended. So just recently I got the new title being Dean of Liferay University.
Wow.
So I'll be here to cover questions for certifications, for training, for anything that you might want to learn about Liferay, and to get feedback, to get some ideas where we should concentrate for the next courses and next lessons that we publish there.
Nice.
And the next episode for Radio Liferay is already recorded. I'm just waiting for the approval.
Shameless plug as usual, but that's okay.
Of course.
Okay. Okay, let me see if I can make this to switch automatically to the person who talks. And I'll start with the first question. And if I mispronounce someone's name, please excuse my poor interpretation skill. So this comes from Kailash Yadav. It's on Twitter. And it goes, why are so many internal packages in Liferay, especially anything that is in display context classes? And there are no direct way to customize those internal classes? I would generalize the question as more about how to deal with all those things that the product does not expose as a API that it's essentially not meant to be extended. How do people deal with those? Who would like to talk about that?
So I can at least give some ideas of what I know about this a little bit. So most of those come from the desire of making upgrades easier, and at least that's the path we want to take. And for a while, we saw that upgrades are a challenging aspect of Liferay, especially when you're actually touching UI, which is where this display context will probably actually land, right? And since you're actually, before we would just write a hook or something like that, and then just replace a whole GSP that had logic intertwined with presentation and data and everything together. So you could just do a small minor tweak or maybe a big one, and then that got you the result you wanted. Then upgrade time came, or changes happened on that JSP, things got moved around, logic changed, and then it was impossible to know like what was what before and what was what now and how to move on from there, right? So I think 2 versions ago, we started trying to think how to come up with a better model for that. A model that would allow for easier customization and at the same time simplify or make it more as an API, right? So what we started doing was trying to model our own applications, saying, okay, this is the data I'm going to need, right? And then turn your view in just to that, doing that, just to be a template that's just rendering a predefined or predetermined set of data. And that's somehow how the logic went from a Java or a JSP file to a display context as a way to later on be able to expose and just act on the data, which would remain for the most part unchanged and stable throughout versions, right? So it's not the same if you're, let's say, adding something in a dropdown. It's not the same if you're actually having to locate the dropdown, let's say on markup, that's a UL that has an li tag, and then you add one, and then whatever changes happen, then your customization is no longer valid, right? The counterpart is now the code of an application is just saying, I have a list of items, right? And this list is the one that's going to be rendered. So by doing that, the application developers themselves are actually starting to expose that as an API. It's a heavier contract than it was before on UI. So display contexts were like a first step towards that goal, where we would expose our models and our interfaces so they could be easily extended later on. Now, as for why they remain internal and hard to customize, that's something that happened in the process, and we're trying to fix for future releases, adding more, like leveraging OSGi capabilities in a way that most of the things that we use, the tags we use, the things we use to render, become extensible by default. So first step was modeling ourselves, our applications, and now we're trying to take it to the next level, so everything can be exposed automatically. So sometime in between, things might have get out of sync or hidden in some packages. I'd say that's just like a technical challenge that we're facing, but that's some of this story and some of what went on in that process.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that this just happened to be the case through the evolution of the improvements related to the front end, but we are looking into a way to actually make this available for people to customize.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
One thing that I would add is, before OSGi, it was very easy to customize anything in Liferay, even things that were never intended to be customized. It was very powerful, but it was very easy to shoot yourself in the foot. So with OSGi, first, it became more clear that there were so many things that could be customized, and now people were in trouble when trying to upgrade. And we were in trouble when trying to change things because people were customizing them and relying on them as APIs. So that made us become much more aware that we needed a better defined extensibility model. And OSGi actually provided the tools for that. In fact, at the beginning, the first version with OSGi 7.0, we still erred on the side of making exposed packages have classes that were not intended to be customized, and then we run into problems. So because of that, we ended up deciding to err on the side of only exposing, making public those packages that we have intentionally thought that they should be customized or used by customizations. So obviously this has the side effect that even though it solve some of the problems we've seen in the past. It may create some other problems if, like, the person asking the question, I think it was Kailas, may have found, which is in some cases maybe we are on the side of something should have been public and it's not. So for these type of things in particular, we really welcome feedback. So if you think that we're missing something that should be public, let us know, and we'll try to solve that as soon as possible. Maybe the solution is to make an internal class public, or maybe the solution is something else, but we want to hear those needs for extensibility that previously they were solved in a certain way, and we want to make sure they can still be solved, either in that way, by making those classes public, or in some other way.
Okay, all right, I was muted prior to talk. Okay, so I'm going to move to the next question then, which is a question with thesis. And basically it says, given that building a proper OSGi jar is it's hard, and using popular frameworks in OSGi is way different than what most Java developers are used to, wasn't it a mistake to migrate to the architecture, to migrate the architecture to OSGi? Now, before giving the voice to someone, I just want to make one thing clear. I understand the desire to make a statement when you ask a question, but saying that something is hard is a subjective opinion, right? So I would rather not discuss. I mean, I know people who for OSGi is hard, and I know people for whom OSGi is piece of cake. So I don't really want to go into the direction of like discussing whether it's hard or it's easy or it's the right or wrong thing to do. Maybe we can approach that from the perspective of what are the benefits and the downsides of that architectural decision. I don't know who wants to take on that.
So yeah, I can I can make a couple of statements regarding this topic, but I think, for instance, Milen, that you are also quite acquainted with the Java developing tools available for people out there, and you're also very familiar with how to make them work with OSGi. So as you said, some people might find some stuff difficult to do, and some others might find different stuff difficult. So in my opinion, adding OSGi to the portal was never a mistake. I believe it has brought many benefits in extensibility, and also in the things that you as an external user or somebody that wants to extend the portal or add functionality to it can do. So now there are a lot of stuff that can be done, and that can be done like a first-class citizen in the portal, publishing third-party plugins that wasn't available just before. So for instance, something that's simple as sharing one class or sharing an infrastructure from one of the plugins that in the past users might want to do, for instance, for 6.2. It was impossible for other portlets to reuse. Not impossible, but very difficult to do. And besides that, modularizing a product, a monolith like Liferay was, on the architecture that was available back then would have been a real challenge, because basically the application server applications were working against the goal, that is to share modules and share interfaces between different plugins, because actually the application server was meant to do the opposite, which is to keep applications isolated between them. So it, of course, makes some other stuff difficult, but compared to what? Because I know that many people have been complaining about this is a sloppy terrain, because there are a lot of flame wars regarding this. But for instance, a lot of people have complained about JDK 9 when they started modularizing the JDK, and they don't even got started on what OSGi can do. So yeah, of course, OSGi is difficult. Creating jars for OSGi, I wouldn't say is that difficult because a lot of existing Java jars are already OSGi bundles. A different discussion is if they are going to work just if you just hot deploy them somewhere. That's a different thing. But they are already OSGi jars. And what I can say is that I guess that modularity is difficult. It's not because of OSGi. It is because it's a difficult problem. And every approach that has been taken has downsides and upsides. And I would say it's not a problem that is solved easily by any framework out there. So, and I don't think it's optional anymore to not think in a modular way.
Yeah. If I can add to that, I actually think I want to start by saying that I think it's a good question, and I think it's a question that is worth asking and even debating about. In fact, we do it often internally at Liferay and at community events as well. And I think whenever a big project like Liferay undergoes an architectural change, a big architectural change like this, I think it's something that has to be thought very carefully. And I would say at Liferay, we are very aware of that. And in fact, we are very conservative. And as proof of that, there has not really been any big architectural change until now, until the OSGi change. So that was like 14 years or 13 years of product development. And in order to answer the question, what I would add to what Carlos said, which I agree with, is what were we trying to achieve? And what would have been the alternative to achieve that? And I think the key reasons why we realized we needed to improve the architecture towards modularity was that as more and more projects were built on Liferay, the fact that there wasn't a clear extensibility model, and Java EE was not providing a clear extensibility model. In fact, Liferay itself had to deal with a lot of hacking on the class loaders of application servers to allow for extensibility. Then even building solutions on top of Liferay that could be reused or that could be extensible was becoming almost impossible. That's one of the reasons. And the other reason was more internal for the development of the product itself. And the product was becoming so large that with existing architecture, we were starting to see a real threat that we were going to be blocked and we will not be able to grow the product much larger without seriously worsening quality and slowing down the speed of development. And that's what led us to go towards a modularity path. And the key question is, okay, if we needed to go in that, assuming that was the right decision, which I believe it is, what were the alternatives? And as Carlos was saying, there aren't really much better alternatives. So at least I personally don't see them.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to add one other thing. Having said that, I think we are very aware that, at least for some people, OSGi has introduced a lot of things to learn, and maybe some things are harder. And I think that's something that we need to take very, that we need to care about, and we need to improve. So all of this feedback is actually very useful for us because some things are harder, not because of OSGi, but because we still haven't done whatever we have to do to make them easier, right? And hide the complexities of OSGi if it's necessary.
And I want to add another plug, which is just the way to make it a little bit easier, because I had some problems getting used to OSGi first as well, then got some training, and now I actually really like the OSGi approach. And if you go to university.liferay.com, you'll find a free lesson on OSGi, which is called OSGi Basics. I was tempted to call it the basic OSGi basics, but nevertheless, it brings you a very quick introduction to the problems that OSGi solves and kind of the first steps into that world.
Yep. So one thing I just quickly want to add to that is, as someone who often deals with the consumer side, like building applications and actually trying to understand how developers are using it. I do understand the pain. I do understand the learning curve. I do understand things are not as obvious as they used to be. But this always reminds me of a discussion that I had with Venkat Subramanian some time ago. And his question was, is it really more complex, or is it that you don't understand it? I think that's a valid question that we all need to ask ourselves. Like, how much of it is because it's really complex, and how much of it is because we just don't understand it. And the other thing is, we are constantly working not only at Liferay but also with the OSGi Alliance itself. So, like, we are a member of the OSGi Alliance and very active there. And trying to actually make the OSGi as a platform, as a specification, much easier for people to use. So follow the news on that, and you'll see there's a lot of things coming in the pipeline that is supposed to make the whole OSGi user developer experience much better. Because we have a lot of questions in the pipeline, I'm just going to move to the next one. Mm-hmm. And I'm tempted to actually skip it, but from respect from the people who are actually asking the questions, I will not skip any. So it says the form builder, in form builder, we can set as repeatable only one field, but not a set of them. Why haven't you implemented this feature yet? Or do you have an alternative proposal? I don't know if there is anyone on the call who can actually answer that.
So this would probably be more a call more for one of the product managers working on forms. But one thing that I can say is that I have personally been in some conversations where this improvement has been discussed, and there was a general agreement that this is a feature that it would be good to add. So that's what I can say.
Yeah, so in general, for those types of things, and I can give you an example that happened just yesterday. Please go to the suggestions and feature requests category in our forums and post proposals and suggestions and feature requests there, and we'll get them to the respective product teams. And most of the time, they're more than willing to hear your feedback. It's sometimes there is a good reason why something's not being developed. Sometimes it's just we didn't think it was going to be useful. So we're more than happy to have this feedback from you. Okay, so another question from Lee Jordan is, would it be possible to have sandboxed lab branch where things are developed rather than the main product line, and then merging into master only the best from that lab once tested, evaluated, and so on? So yeah, this is my attempt to summarize a very, very long question and a kind of discussion that happened in Slack and in forums into a simple question that I can ask during the online session. But my understanding is it goes down to, would it be possible to develop the product in a so-called lab environment, and then only once things mature in that lab environment, they are kind of moved to the main branch and being released as part of the product? Would that be something that can work?
Yeah, so for me, if I understand the question properly, there are two sides to it. One side has more to do with the software development practices, and we at Liferay use the trunk-based development model, which basically means that we merge into Trunk the work any developer is doing almost daily, right? And that is a process that we use internally, and we are most probably not going to change that anytime soon. However, I think a deeper question here is, if I'm understanding correctly, or the root issue is, how do we make it so that it's easier to include features in the product, even if they are not fully tested, to make it easier for anyone in the community to provide feedback, and then we can use that feedback to determine whether we use whether it's added to the product, right? And then I think that's definitely something we want to do, that we are trying to do in different ways, but probably we can improve on. So in that sense, maybe not in exactly this way as a branch, but it's definitely something that I believe we should continue to get better at.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should definitely have this discussion. I actually asked Lee to move it to the forums, and it's been discussed there. So if you want to participate in that discussion, I invite you to go to the Liferay forums and join in and discuss and provide your feedback there. The next on my list is a question from Jack Baker, but I'm just going to skip it for a second because there are a few more questions very similar in the Slack, and the moment I move to the Slack questions, I'll ask it there. The next one is for me. On behalf of the unnamed people on the forums, Olaf is asking, I didn't know it was like the participants of the live talk was supposed to ask questions. But thanks, Olaf. When will the community beta program start? Several posts have been made pointing community members to the community beta program. Okay, now Olaf asked this question because he knows the answer. The answer.
You also blogged about it, and I've put the question in here before you wrote your blog article.
Okay.
So
for those of you who haven't heard, go to the blogs. There's a recent blog that was published yesterday or today. We decided we actually spent quite some time analyzing the previous beta programs, the way they were run, the outcome that we got from them. Long story short, we came to the conclusion that the community beta program, as we know it, it doesn't serve very well the purpose that we want it to serve. For two reasons. It kind of comes too late in the game. It's typically with alpha beta releases when product is mostly feature complete. And any feedback that is not bugs, but it's like, oh, let's change this functionality like totally. It's kind of too late at that point. And also it's constrained. It comes in the time where our engineering teams are very busy with trying to prepare the release. We realized that it actually comes. It drives more frustration on both sides rather than benefits. And besides, if you look into it, the beta program is basically a part of a much larger process, which is constantly gathering feedback. So what we're trying to replace it with, which is the next question that I'll ask for me, is what we call the continuous feedback process. And I kind of mentioned that in my blog from yesterday. I'm currently in a process with discussing the details with all the product and engineering teams to actually see how can we process feedback internally in the best possible and most efficient way. And I'm really hoping to have some answers to you in the next couple of days about how we're gonna collect your feedback like constantly. So you don't have to wait for us to release a product to tell us what you would like to change, but you actually be able to see it much earlier in the game and provide your feedback much earlier. So that's the change, and it's an ongoing change. Anyone wants to add something to that?
I have posted the link to your article into the YouTube chat, so it should appear next to the stream video.
Thank you. Okay, so Philip Hellmeyer asks, are there any best practices to know when running Liferay on OpenShift? And also, what are the problems and critical steps for migrating Liferay 6 to Liferay DXP? And as I said earlier, this falls to me in this category of like providing support. It's not a product decision. We do not develop the product with the mind of running it on OpenShift, right? And or running it on any particular platform for that matter. Those are operational issues that I don't think the people on this call would be able to provide any good answer to. But that's why we have the forums. That's why we have the Slack channel. Please reach out. I particularly have experience with some of those, and I can try to help you as well as other community members. Yes, there is a migration process, both for now. Jorge, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is a migration process both for code and data from Liferay 6 to Liferay DXP, right? So those should be able to help you, and then the steps are well defined there.
I want to add that, well, you brought me here basically because of training and university, and we do have an upgrade training course, which is available in person as well as on university. And that covers an upgrade from 6.2 to 7.1.
Nice. Yeah. So we also covered that in trainings, or is that on university only?
Both. That is available in person, so we can have somebody come to you. I don't know if we offer that training in public currently. I know that I conducted it right after the North American Symposium last year. And I don't know if it's currently scheduled for an online training, but it is available and it's on university. It's one of the paid trainings on university. So I can't just send you there and say, hey, your problem is solved. You need your credit card or something for that. But it's available and it covers 6.2 to 7.1.
Okay, so that's even one more source of information for that, how to deal with that problem. Okay, so the next question I have is from Luis Chuyam Duran, if I'm reading it properly, and it says, will it be possible in the near future to choose which modules of Liferay you want to activate, ship in order to build a custom lighter bundle?
Can't you already?
Yeah, so Carlos can probably give some more details, but I would say from a strictly technical perspective, it is already possible, and that's something that OSGi is giving us. What we have found out is that it's not only about what's technically possible, but what's a good idea to do, or what are the implications of removing some modules. Because one of the benefits of Liferay is that it has a lot of features and they are integrated. So when you remove a module, then you may be affecting additional modules. And if that dependency is a required dependency, then these other modules will automatically uninstall as well. Like, for example, the forums, you may say, I don't use forums, but you may use comments. And the comments are actually provided by the forums module. So those dependencies are something that need to be taken into account. And because in Liferay, there are so many features that complement each other and improve each other, then there might be more things that you are using that you realize you are using. So I don't know, Carlos, if you want to add some additional extra technical details. But.
No, that's a really good way to put it. So as you said, having the technical possibility to separate the stuff or to create boundaries between the different parts of the product, it doesn't mean that we already have separated all of them, or that some of them aren't using other ones under the hood. So the separation is not as clear. Also, there are some other challenges that arise with upgrades, fix packs, and other maintenance processes that you need to do in the product. So the too long didn't read answer, or the short answer would be like, yes, we are working towards that. There are some modules that can be removed, and you can create a slimmer version of Liferay. but there's still work to do to that regard. So yeah, but the ultimate goal is to achieve that.
Yeah, so basically saying it's not coming in 7.2.
Well, so I don't know when or what would be the dawn signal, or the when, so when you have the we are already there flag, like it's done, you can remove everything and just install blocks. So I think it's more of a process, and yeah, so that's something we're working on.
Yeah, so to provide an example, or following up on my previous example, I would say it could be argued that technically it's already possible since 7.0, right? However, you can say, I really want to remove forums, but I want to keep comments. So obviously, one thing we could do is to try to create a smaller module which provides only the comments functionality, maybe making a copy, or maybe yes, that module will be also the core of forums, but additional forums functionality will be outside. So that's something we could do, and then it would be possible to remove the rest of forums. The question is, there are many of those things, and what is the return of investment of doing that versus doing other competing things, right? So there will always be things that can be done to make it easier to remove certain parts that right now might not be possible or desirable because of the dependencies, but it will not always be worth doing that.
Yeah, I see. So yeah, and then this is also like kind of a historical reasons, because you guys need to remember this historically used to be one big project, which we are still splitting into smaller bits and pieces. Yeah, the comparison I typically hear is like, well, if I was building this, I would build it differently. And my answer to that is, if we were building Liferay from scratch today, we probably could have done a lot of things differently as well. But it's a product that has like, what, 20 years?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not a startup. It's not something that we started yesterday and we can freely experiment with.
So one, actually related to this, I just remember one piece of inside information that I think it's okay to share is at one point, there was an internal study in which we surveyed customers and potential customers in order to find out if it would make sense to launch specific purpose products which just took some specific functionalities of Liferay. And then there were a variety of reasons for doing that. One could be a product that could be supported with less cost, and then maybe the subscription cost could be less, things like that. And the results of that survey was that it was not possible, because it seems the customers or the market in general, actually what they value the most of Liferay is to have all of those functionalities available. Even if they didn't use it, they valued that they could use them. And there was no single cluster of functionalities that could be identified.
Okay, so two more questions from Luis. Can we expect a revamp of Liferay documentation? Thinking of the poll you did on Slack. Okay, that's a question for me. Could we expect 7.x documentation instead of 7.0, 7.1, etc.? Yes, you absolutely can expect a new documentation. Now, will that be the documentation structure that I proposed and asked you on Slack? Probably not. We are currently working on a new website for the Liferay portal, which will also contain the documentation, and we're internally debating, taking all the feedback that we received into account, like what we should actually do. How do we structure it? How we make it easier to find and to work with? We're also working on the best way to provide examples and sample codes. So this is a large initiative that goes between developer relations team that I'm part of, the knowledge management team that is responsible for documentation, and also the product teams, which are actually the the people that actually build the product and provide us with information about the features and their intended usages. So yes, this is coming, and it's probably we're hoping, and well, that the goal is to have this released together with 7.2. Now, can we have a 7.x documentation instead of 7.0 and 7.01? We haven't considered that. My guess would be no, and the reason is those what is normally called minor releases in a normal version notation are not really minor in terms of our product release. So 7.0 and 7.1 are not necessarily 100% backward compatible. So it would be hard to have one documentation that covers both. There is a significant amount of functionality that would be the same, probably, but also there will be a significant changes in other functionalities that would make such a big difference that it would be hard to put that into one piece of documentation. And I fear maybe this is something we can consider if someone has a good proposal about it, but I fear that if we start writing documentation in a form of one document and then split it inside, like, oh, here's how you do it in 7.0 and here how you do it in 7.1 and so forth, this actually may be more confusing and harder to use than if we have separate documentation per product release. But that's my opinion. Don't take that as a decision. It's not something we are considering at the moment. If someone has a great idea about how to achieve that, please let me know, and I'm open to discuss it. Okay, unless you guys want to comment on that, I'm going to move to the next question, which is, I guess this goes to Chema, maybe. Why Liferay team tasks and Liferay team deps 7.1 dependencies are still in the release candidate version months after 7.1 release? When NPM packages dependencies vulnerabilities will be fixed?
Okay, so for those of you that don't know, this question is asking about what we're trying now to call the Liferay JS Theme Toolkit, previously known as Themes SDK. This was an initiative we took a while ago, and it started as a member contribution or idea, DevCon, where it was presented as a proof of concept on how to actually make building themes for Liferay easier and more attractive to front-end developers, so they could actually use the tools they were used to. Since then, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but please bear with me for a minute. So since then, we actually tried to turn that into a real feature that we could offer, right? So we took that initial community feedback and ideas and then turned it into something we could offer. And that was turning that into an enterprise-like offer with support, with everything that conveys, being feature complete and everything. It's taking some time. And so since then, and since 7.1 release, so we set up the goal that for 7.1, we should start offering support for these tools, right? And so we moved on to alphas and betas for that specific version, where we try to iron out all the details and all the quirks that we had seen on previous versions. And then we went on release candidate process, and that's the time where we actually rolled out official support for that. So that tool is now officially supported. That means that those of you with support contracts, you can just direct your questions to your support engineers, and they'll either answer, try to fix that, or channel those issues through us, so we can actually give you a better support and a better tool for that. So we haven't gone out of RC because we've been trying to get as stable and as perfect tool as we can. So, and we keep getting some minor issues with the upgrades processes. We lately added Docker support, so you can actually deploy on Docker. So those things, we're trying to get to a point where we're satisfied with the quality before actually making the release. That tied to the reason that the fact that we're nearing another release has made it or made us take the decision or try to take the decision that we could target a final release either by the time we release 7.2 or a little bit earlier. So we can support both versions, 7.1 and 7.2 at the same time without having to actually split the tooling, which was our initial goal. So we initially thought we would need to have different versions of the same tool to support different versions of Liferay. So that was the naming scheme that we took. So 8.0 versions would support 7.1, and then from there on, we would actually take a major version update on our tooling to signal that we would be supporting different Liferay Portal or Liferay DXP versions. So since not that much has changed, and now we're trying to take the opportunity to just put it all together on the same one. So that's why we haven't released the final yet, because we want to just add support for 7.2, put everything in place so that when we finally release the official version, we can have everything in sync and already in place for both 7.1, 7.2 with official support included. And of course, that includes fixing some of the final issues we're seeing, both related to upgrades, vulnerabilities. This is a long-standing, it's not a long-standing issue for us, but Node or NPM, they will keep flagging all projects or all packages with the vulnerabilities. So we want to address those before we actually say we're out of RC. So that's one of the reasons, but we expect to get that done in the next few months.
All right, thanks, Chema. So let's move to the next question. That's my question. Returning the favor to Olaf. So this is from the Slack channel, which you just joined. Congratulations!
I gave up finally.
Yes, and the question goes: is backend developer training enough for participation for certification exam? I would say enough for. The question would be enough for passing the certification exam, because it seems it does not cover all the topics from the exam list.
So it's designed to be, or it's meant to be enough, which means if you have gone through backend developer training and you actually can follow up on these questions yourself, you can basically solve all of the exercises yourself, which means there's always a little bit of, what's it called? Experience is it? A little bit of experience. So once you have internalized everything, then it's actually, meant to be sufficient. Did you already ask the additional question there on the questions?
No, I was about to. And since we're on that, the additional question is that there seems to be wrong or clear answers to example questions. While it is understandable, it's hard to formulate a question correctly. Probably the example ones should be perfect. Again, this is not my words. This is from people saying that on Slack.
Yeah, I don't fully agree with that. I don't say the example ones should be perfect. I would say all of them should be perfect. So I'd go a little bit further. If there is anything that is not good in terms of the questions, then please let us know. That's as far as I would go. If there is anything that seems to be a bug, seems to be an unexact question, then I want to know about it, and I will make it known to the people who are actually working on the exam questions, because it's of no good use to have them. The situation that we're in, I have been participating in bringing together the questions and the answers, which is a very hard problem. It's not so hard to bring in the questions. The hard part is actually the answers, and especially the wrong answers, because they must not mislead you willingly and explicitly, and they must not be obviously blatantly wrong. They must be somewhere fair in terms of being wrong, being right, being easy, being deductible. And yeah, if something went wrong, and especially in the example questions, then I'd be very much interested in learning about them.
Okay, now that you're on Slack, I can actually point you to the actual thing that people wrote, so you can answer there. Okay, so now I'm going back to Slack, as my original documents, the questions from my original document are all asked. And here goes Jack Baker with a couple of questions. And I think it also, in the same tone, is the follow-up question from Fernando Fernandez, which basically goes, what approaches tools may be coming available to facilitate creating headless APIs for retrieving structured content fully rendered by template and or in HTML fragments per structure parts? Just so that we don't split this, there is a follow-up question about GraphQL support. And there is also the question from Fernando, which is about the attempt to use JSON WS APIs in order to develop portlets in JavaScript, but those don't seem to work with from the guest user perspective. Is API the way to go? So I think all this goes to like, what is our approach to headless and how we deal with that?
Yeah, I can probably take this one. So as we've been talking about in the last events, we are pushing towards building a new set of REST APIs, building on the JAX-RS with OSGi support that we've introduced in 7.0 and 7.1, and that Carlos was actually one of the developers for. And we are building on top of that to develop a whole new set of REST APIs. Lately, we've been putting a lot of emphasis on adopting the Open API standard, which we believe is going to make it much easier to build consumers for these APIs. And if I've understood the first question properly, they were asking, how can I obtain web content and structured content that is rendered? So in these APIs, for example, we're putting a lot of emphasis on providing APIs for a structured web content. And they are going to be very, very flexible. And in particular, it will be possible to get web content either in JSON, and because your consumer wants each of the fields and do whatever rendering they want on their device or bot or whatever. But we will also have an option to ask for the rendered in HTML, the rendered web content, and you can even specify which template you want. So you could ask for it rendered in any of the templates that are available for that specific structure. Then you also mentioned GraphQL, and as part of these efforts, we are also investing on GraphQL, and in 7.2, we will have at least some initial GraphQL APIs. And one of the things that we're putting a lot of emphasis on, as we've also talked in the past events, is defining very well thought out types, which is something that is mandatory in GraphQL, and it's not mandatory, but it's a very best practice for REST. And we are sharing the definition of those types between the new REST APIs and the GraphQL APIs. And I think the last question you asked was related to JSON WS. So this JSON WS or JSON Web Services will continue to exist. And for the time being, they will probably be the most complete still because they are auto-generated. However, our advice is to use the new REST APIs or GraphQL APIs if they meet all your needs, because they're going to be so much easier to consume.
Right, and so on the JSON WS question, for as far as I recall, it's been a while since I used it last time, but for as far as I remember, it is possible to use it from unauthenticated for the guest user. All you need is to get the proper token, I believe.
Yeah. So Carlos,
I will. Yeah, I think I can answer that. So yeah, it's definitely possible to use JSON Web Services as guest user, but you need to create a service access profile that is marked as default, because default access profiles are those who are assigned to the guest user. In the service access profiles, you specify which services and methods of those services are going to be available for that profile. And default profiles get all stacked on top of guest. So that would be the way to do that. And yeah, I would also want to add something, if I may, on what Jorge said. So the question went as, what are the tools that are going to be there to create a headless and to consume from headless? So in contrast with JSON Web Services, as Jorge said, it's going to be the more complete because it's auto-generated. One of the drawbacks or downsides of JSON Web Services is that it is what it is. So it's not everything is auto-generated. So maybe it doesn't do what you want. In the event that you might want to expose it publicly, or in that event, then you might want less stuff provided, or the other way around. Maybe you want to use it for backend to backend communication, so it's not exporting as much as you want. So to that extent, we added the JAX-RS support to Liferay. Now it's in the form of the whiteboard, the JAX-RS whiteboard, but it allows you to tailor what you want to be exported from Liferay using REST, and in a very accurate way. So you can deploy as many endpoints as you want, and you can provide in those endpoints exactly with the things that you want to provide. And it will also allow you to reconfigure the addresses, mapping of exceptions, how types are rendered. So it's a very, very flexible tool that is provided to you, and that it's going to be like extensible. So I think that would cover like most of the needs of anybody.
Nice, thank you. Okay, following up is a very long question from Krzysztof Gołębiowski, which I'm going to try to shorten because I think it's an important question. And he targets Jorge, which I think is the best person to answer it, actually. So the question goes like, we all learned that Liferay is going with like e-commerce and all these new products and new interfaces and all these improvements around web content management and whatnot, which is great. But what happened to things like social office and wikis and forums and workflows? It seems like that, and to quote the exact question, some of those seems like not maintained for a long time. Forums and wikis are also trying to catch up, are not trying to catch up with modern tools that people use in 2019. You want to try to answer that?
So I think I agree with Christoph. There are applications, there are portlets that have only been slightly improved in the past few years, and yeah, I think some of them are really need a revamp. So one of the things that we realized not so long ago is that if we kept adding more and more portlets, more and more applications, then with the same investment, we're gonna be able to invest less on them. So over the last couple of releases, we've actually been making the hard work of trying to identify those applications that were not really being used so much, or the return on investment for our customers in them was not so high, and deprecating them so that we would have more time to be able to work on some of the other tools. And it is also true that we've invested a lot in new capabilities like forms, e-commerce, analytics, modern site building, etc. Now, in 7.2, for example, we are investing in some areas that we had not invested enough in the past releases, such as, for example, documents and media, or web content management, internally known as journal. And we have plans to invest in some other tools in the near future, like some of the ones mentioned by Christoph, like forums. We are thinking about maybe merging and get the best of wikis and knowledge base, so that we could invest in one of them more instead of splitting the investment. And overall, we're going to also continue to do the work, and the community feedback is very useful for that, because we want to know what are the tools that are really providing the most value, so that we can invest in those. And we'll continue to flag, by deprecating them, those applications where we are not going to invest, and we may even remove them, so that if we are not going to invest, at least you know, right? And by knowing, it also gives you the opportunity to fight back and say, hey, this is actually super useful, right? So even if we are not deprecating them, for any applications that you use and that are very valuable and you would like more investment, it's really, really useful for us if you speak up and you let us know. Even you let us know more about how you are using them and what are the needs that are unmet right now. Even if it seems obvious to you, it's still very valuable, right? Because what it's obvious to you might not be so obvious to anyone else.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. If something in the among the products that we have is of value for you, tell us about it, so we know that this needs more investment. Okay, and I'm gonna move to the question by Vitaly Koshelenko. I think this one we kind of answered already, because this also goes around the forums, and it basically says, how can I customize the fields settings? The longer version is about exporting settings. I would say there is no one from the forums team on the call, and we don't really have time to dig deeper into that. But if the feature that you're looking for, like such as exporting the definition and importing the definition, or whatever else is that you're interested in, is not there, and that's not only about forms; it's about any application or the core product in general. Please get in touch. Please use the suggestions and feature requests, and you get one of the two. We either respond with, yeah, that's a good idea, and we'll implement it in the future, or we'll give you a good explanation of why it wasn't implemented, what are the potential issues with that, and maybe you can help solve these issues. I don't know, but that's a longer discussion in anyway. It's not something that I think we can answer here. Okay, so Fernandez is asking another question. What is the future of Service Builder? I don't see much evolution there, lacking basic stuff like decimal numbers instead of floats, fundamental for apps, and handling currency. Who is the Service Builder expert?
So I think none of us are Service Builder experts, but I can try to answer, as you said, not as an official answer, but I think my opinion, based on what I see, our strategy with Service Builder has always been the same, which is we don't want a tool that solves all of the problems. We want a tool that is as simple as possible, as solves problems that we have had at Liferay, or that we have seen very clearly that our community has. So the development of Service Builder is to a very large degree reactive, which means a developer, often from inside Liferay, but sometimes as a request from the community or from several community members, because it comes repeatedly, for a feature, then we add it. And there is no roadmap for for Service Builder in general. There has been some exceptions, but rather is reactive, whatever is needed. For example, one feature that was needed by several teams within Liferay was to have support for versioning. And every time versioning had to be implemented, then it was a lot of work for each entity and for each team. So the core infrastructure team, which is the team that takes care, among many other things, of Service Builder, then started working with these teams and created a new functionality which allows versioning an entity. And it automatically creates the extra table and the extra generated code to support versioning. Okay? But this didn't come as something that they proactively tried to implement, but rather as a need, and in this case came from several internal teams. So I would say it's the same thing for the community. If they really need a specific feature, they should voice it out, they should create a feature request, try to connect with other community members who have the same need, and then that's when the core infrastructure team will notice it and will implement the improvement. Or they can, the community members can also contribute it.
Yeah, we have a question on that coming, contribution part that I mean. But for now, another question from Fernando is, I've seen Brian Chan keynote at DEF CON, and he said OSGi made things more complex, and I agree. But that there's a work going on for OSGi to be hidden somehow. Any news on what's being done to make the Liferay for those OSGi more developer friendly? Okay, probably Carlos want to answer that, but I'm just going to try to answer from my part for as much as I can. So there's a lot of things that we've been working on to make it friendly. Now the question is, the fundamental question, I believe, is like, what does it mean friendly, and friendly to who, right? So one of the things that Ray Auger is working on, he's working on an OSGi specification to support CDI. And that's going to make it super easy to use CDI annotations in OSGi environment. So if you are familiar with CDI, if you've been building Java EE applications, things will be much easier for you. It's not going to be that you can totally forget about OSGi, but it's all of a sudden it's going to make your life much easier. But if you're a Spring Boot guy, you never use CDI annotation, it doesn't really make it any easier for you, right? So if we were to make the claim that we're going to make it super easy for everyone, that's going to be probably a lie. So it's picking the technologies that potentially most people are already familiar with and making it easier for those particular developers is by utilizing the technologies that they already know is, I think, the thing we're focusing mostly on. And as I said, part of this work is going on inside Liferay's development and the product itself. But large part of that work is also going in the OSGi Alliance, influencing and working on specs. And as Carlos, I know, is working on some of those specs, maybe he can add more to that as well.
No, but I think you put it very, very well. I think that's pretty much it. I was going to say with CDI, and also we have efforts like Blade tools, Blade CLI, to provide templates for modules and building tools to make life easier, kind of what Maven archetypes did and stuff like that. So what can I say? Also, Milen mentioned that we can accept ideas from you guys when you find something difficult, or you can ask, we can answer. Maybe somebody can build an archetype or can build a template or stuff like that to help making stuff easier for somebody, because we don't know how everybody uses everything. So it's a good feedback that we can receive from your part too. And so for instance, standards and giving back to the community, like Milan said, with the Alliance and other projects that we're giving back, like Apache and stuff like that, also bring us more insight on how community and how people out there use stuff and how to merge all those things together, so the learning curve is not so steep.
Yeah, and I would add, so maybe this question was not for me or at all, but I would just say that I think overall we're always trying to make things easier and to hide complexity. And it's not just about OSGi, but it's about our frameworks, about the tooling we use. So we're a very heavy, like backend oriented software, right? And that's why we're discussing OSGi and everything. And ways to hide that, like we're working on ways to allow front developers to not just forget about OSGi, but forget about Java altogether, right? So they can actually build JavaScript applications using the framework they choose, and then they just using their tools deploy and get an app running on our server. So that's something that's also coming along the way. So it's not just about OSGi, but it's also about empowering our developers and our customers to just get the best out of the technologies they already know. So there's not just one, but many efforts catered through on along those lines. And I think most of the infra and DevTools team are continuously working on trying to high complexity in many ways. Right. So just to add on that.
Yeah, that's a valid point too. There is a question that I believe Carlos would love to answer, which is it possible to debug GSP pages inside OSGi jar bundles? This was easy with WAR files. It doesn't work for jars by default.
So I must say that I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think anyone on this call is familiar in deep details how exactly the compilation of GSP pages works inside OSGi environment. I'll try to find the answer for that, talking to the respective team, and I'll get back to you on Slack or on forums. Just make sure to ask again and to remind me. Okay, there is a similar one, the JSF portlet from Jose Fernandez. Currently, the JSF portlets have to be deployed as WAR files. This has some issues when recovering parts of the portal, synchronizing with application servers. Are there any plans to make more natural integrations with app servers, deployment and getting deployment description working, sharing resources? I'm not sure in particular about JSF. This is Neil's team working on JSF portal. I know Neil and Ray are working very close on the new specs about JSF and portlets. I think there is a significant improvements going on there. The best way to ask this question and to have this discussion is to go on the forums and find the forum category for JSF. I need to say that the JSF folks at Liferay are probably the team that is the most responsive on forums. They recently shared some stuff that they basically have 0 unanswered questions. So they would be more than happy to hear your concerns and to explain to you what is currently the status and what they're working on and what will be available. Unless someone wants to really comment on that.
Yeah, I would like to add something because I'm not an expert, and so take everything I say with a grain of salt. But when you deploy a WAR in Liferay, it really becomes a OSGi bundle under the hood. So it still has access to the environment. And as Milan said before, Ray is working in the CDI integration with OSGi, which is an spec from the OSGi Alliance, and that would, since JSF, if I remember correctly, is an EE spec, it works on top of CDI. So that would be the best way to bridge the two worlds together. By using CDI, you will be able to access the OSGi environment from JSF. That's what I would expect, at least, to be the best.
I think the CDI is the base for all the other improvements. But I also know Neil Griffin is working on more improvements and compatibility with the upcoming specs. So he would definitely be able to provide more details on that. So yeah, use the forums. That's my advice. And the question that Jorge has been waiting for, I believe, just kidding. Why is most of Liferay's code undocumented?
Yeah, so if this is referring to Javadoc, this is frequent complaint even internally. And the main reason is just that internally we had a very strict policy for adding Javadocs. Brian, which you may know is the original founder of the product and the company, had very bad experiences with bad Javadoc, lying about the code or that were very inconsistent. So he preferred to have no Javadoc than to have Javadoc that were bad. So he proposed, and that was kept for a very, very long time, a very, very strict process for adding Javadoc with a lot of reviews. So actually, we could not internally send code with Javadoc. The Javadoc had to follow a different process. And the result of that is that actually we had almost no Javadoc. It was very hard to go through the process. For the last few years, that's been relaxed. And it's easier now to add Javadoc. However, the source code of Liferay is huge. So it's going to take a very long while to have a lot of code. I mean, a lot of Javadocs within the code.
Okay. I just noticed another question on the.
I'm currently looking up something on this, which is we had a Radio Liferay episode, which was episode 21, but it's from 2012. So the episode was called Bringing Back Javadoc. And having the question right now with this answer, I would say shows us, yeah, there is some work to do. But I do remember that even I committed some Javadoc because we had a contest on who submits the most Javadoc. And I remember to have picked a few low-hanging fruits. So maybe there is an opportunity for future priorities or contests.
Yeah, I think the Javadoc, the missing Javadocs question will be popping up in the next months at least.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I don't know, Jorge, you maybe know how many lines of code is Liferay?
I actually haven't seen any objective measurement for many years.
But I think it's like from one of the third-party tools that scans GitHub repos. I think it goes in millions.
Yeah. I think several years ago, one of those tools were saying like 2 or 3 million, but then another one was saying 8 million. So I don't know how they were counting, but it's probably between 1 and 10 million for sure.
Right, so I can imagine if we really want to have a complete Javadoc for every single method that is in the code base, it's probably effort estimated in, I don't know, months, years. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we are getting this complaint, if we keep getting that complaint in the near future. Okay, so I just noticed a question, follow-up question on the service builder discovery, the service builder discussion about why not provide an alternative or sample to use JPA only persistence? I'm not sure, again, that's the right audience here. I don't think we're going to have a good answer for that unless someone willing to take on that. But again, if you have any ideas of how to do that, like how that would be helpful, how that be implemented, how that be different and better than what we already have, or you want to just do it and contribute it, you're more than welcome to. Open that discussion on forums and let's see where it goes with the proper team involved.
One thing I can say about this is, in general, we try to focus our samples on Liferay specific technology, unless if it's third-party technology like JPA, unless there is something very special that has to be done. So I personally, I'm not experienced with JPA, but I do know some partners that have standardized on using JPA instead of Service Builder, for example. So I know it's possible for sure, and I'm guessing, but that it's not very difficult. But if I'm wrong and it's something that is difficult, yeah, I think we'd like to know, and it might make sense to create a sample in that case.
Yep. Oh, I was hoping someone was going to ask this question. Thank you, Piotr Baradyuk. I would like to ask about plans for having more contribution to Liferay source. Do you have any plans how you would like to boost the engagement of community members in contributing to Liferay source? By that I mean refactoring existing features, making them more extensible, or possibly creation of some key features that you have in your mind or roadmap but don't have enough time to develop on your own in a given timeline. I definitely would see Liferay having a leadership role in this, but I'm not sure if this is currently being debated, or maybe it is being provided, but not in an optimal way in the past. Anyone?
I think you're the one who should answer this.
Okay, I'll start and I'll pass it back to you, though. There are two things. There are two sides of that question. One side of that question is, how can we engage the community? How can we actually make it so that people want to contribute, and it's easy for them to contribute? And that is the part that I'm actually dealing with, and the developer relations team is dealing with. And there are several things we're currently working on. One is making sure that the process of building the portal itself, the product itself, it's super easy. Right now, it is not the case. It takes some effort and knowledge. If you just go to GitHub and download the source code, it's not a click a button and get it running, compiled and running. It's a little bit of a complicated process, which we are trying to simplify. We are working closely with some of the teams, particularly with the team responsible for tooling, led by Greg Emerson, trying to improve that process to make it so that it is very easy. It's like download, issue a comment, and get the portal up and running, and then you can start contributing to that. There are other things like contribution license agreements, like discussions and things like that. So those are the things that we as a developer relations are focusing on to make it super simple and super easy, provide all the documentations and steps, and make sure that actually it's a nice process from a developer perspective to contribute. Now, the flip side of that process is what happens when you do contribute, actually. So you sit down and you write a piece of code, and then you send it, and what happens then? And this is something that I don't really have too many details at the moment to tell you. And this is an internal discussion that we are having. It's One thing is fixing a bug, and fixing a bug is, well, first it has to be decided whether it's a bug or intended functionality. But let's say we have already a means to do that, and then that's relatively easily. We get a fix, and we're going to tell you, hey, that's not a bug, or oh, thank you, it is a bug, and your fix is okay. But if you contribute a whole new functionality, or you change the way things behave, right? It may make perfect sense for you. It may be the best solution, your dream solution. Still, the question is, does that fit our roadmap? What our customers, what our people say to that? Like, how does that feel into the general product development? Does it work nicely with other plans that we have or not? And those are the tough questions. Those are the ones that I don't have answer for. Those are the ones that I don't really know how to address at this very moment. And we do have these discussions internally. We do want this process to work. We do want to have more feedback, more contributions. It's a little bit too challenging in the moment to. And right now, I don't really have a good answer to that. And I was really hoping Jorge is going to give some more details on that.
I want to step in just very briefly, because saying that the product management needs to accept that the customers actually want that sound like, yeah, maybe they reject all of the features. And I think that's not so much it, but it's any contributions must then be maintained. And it's rather, are we ready to maintain those features and accept that as a future maintenance part, which might be harder than just, do our customers want that? Well, if somebody takes care of implementing it, somebody wants it. And I'd rather see it from that angle. But with that, I'll pass on to Jorge.
I'd like to add before Jorge. So just to remind that sometimes we also have other projects that may have a lower barrier of entry, and I'm talking here about some of our front-end projects and our tooling. And that's one of the examples of what Olaf was just saying. So we recently, and I talked about how we added Docker support for deployment of themes. And that was actually a community contribution. So the process was actually, an issue was open on the GitHub. So everything, and I think that's where Milen was going, and Olaf too, everything starts with a conversation on why, or what do you need and why, right? And then after talking about it for a little bit, I think actually, I don't know if I reached out to them directly, or I think it was maybe through the Slack channel where we just asked for contributors, if anyone was up to contributing this. And one particular member was actually willing to do that because it was important for them, and they were already using it, and then they had developed their own solution for that in past versions. So he just developed the code and sent pull request to the repo. And then after that, then of course, because it has to be maintained, then we took on the job to review, go through a common review process until we were satisfied that we could merge and maintain, because eventually we want to take that load off the contributor and make it part of the product itself. And we've had other successful contributions, smaller ones in like bug fixes and things like that on the theme tools, on the themes toolkit. So just saying that there's other projects that might be easier, especially if you're a front-end developer, because it might be easier to get it up and running. But the important part is that it needs to be a conversation between us first, right? So don't go wasting a lot of work and effort. Usually it's good to come to an agreement on what we want and then work together on making it a reality. So just always try to start with a conversation. That would be my 2 cents.
So I think you guys have said it all, or almost. I actually wanted to praise Piotr for the way he's asked the question, and I particularly like how he mentions that he might be interested, and he assumes other people might be interested in actually looking at what features are in the roadmap, but maybe we just don't have enough time, or they are not prioritized to be done immediately. And I really like the way he asked that question. And in fact, we recently have made some small changes to the feature requests in Jira, so that the product managers working in each of the teams can flag a feature request as, yeah, this is aligned with the roadmap. So because previously we could only flag them as, yeah, we're going to work on them. But meanwhile, it was not possible for any person who wanted to contribute or just wanted to follow it to know, yeah, this is aligned with the roadmap, even if it's not prioritized yet. So hopefully that will help any contributor who wants to add a feature to either make a proposal for a feature request and get an answer quickly, whether it's aligned with the roadmap or not, but also look for other features that others have proposed, which are aligned with the roadmap, if they are looking for ideas to contribute.
Okay, so I think that pretty much explains it from both sides. What I'm going to add to that is that if you can start with, if you haven't contributed before and you hadn't started with a smaller project, please do so. That's typically much easier. You have to keep in mind that the flagship product is a commercial. At the end of the day, it ends up being a commercial thing that we sell, that we provide support for, and so forth. So it comes with more restrictions and guidelines and expectations. So you can't just jump into it and change something and then expect that it's going to be merged, right? It simply doesn't work this way. So follow Channel's advice and talk about your idea first. Even if you have the source code, even if you're ready to contribute, start with a conversation, discuss things, show your code, and if the problem is that you don't have the tools to do that, or that you don't have the knowledge, or you don't have the feedback from our side, you don't know if that is useful or not, then reach out to us, Slack, email, developerrelations@liferay.com, forums, whatever. And tell us about it. Tell us, I can't contribute because I'm lacking this. I don't have the tools. I don't have the knowledge. It would be nice if I knew this and that. And those are the feedback, that the things that we are interested in knowing. Like our role in the process is to actually make the process work. And we are working hard, we as a developer relations team, working hard to make those processes as useful as we can. But please do not confuse that with a promise that we're going to provide you with a process that where, with a push of a button, you get your code merged into the main product. This is not going to happen. Okay. Any more questions? Because I think we. Okay, no, there are more questions. Okay, another. I think Liferay out of the box should come with a good set of content structures plus templates, allowing a newbie user to create nice websites fast. I'm not sure if that is a question, but I think that's an opportunity for someone to mention the new, how we call them now? Someone help me, please. Site
accelerators.
Accelerators, thank you. Jorge, you familiar with that, or Carl? I'm not sure who knows a lot about that.
Yeah, so the accelerators is just the terminology we are using to provide finished specific purpose solutions, and they've been done for commerce. Every commerce has several accelerators that have this I mean, that are focused on, for example, B2B in a specific industry, or with a specific approach for doing B2B. And the technology that supports building accelerators, such as site initializers, is available in Liferay DXP. But we'll probably, I mean, it's something we've been discussing, and we are looking for some opportunities to leverage that as part of Liferay DXP as well. And it will most probably come, but it's not fully defined yet. I'm not sure if that answers the question, or if there was some other aspects to it, Milan.
I'm not sure either, but I think we are. I hope it does. And I wasn't even sure if it was a question at all. It was just something the last thing I saw on slide. And I think we're 10 minutes past the hour and a half mark. So I think we'll cut it here. Now, I hope this session was useful. I'm gonna give everyone like 1 minute to for final remarks before we close, in the same order as before, starting from Jorge.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I hope this was useful for you guys. That was the purpose. Please let us know if it was, and whether you'd like to do something like this or similar sessions again. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for participating. Carlos?
Yep, same thing. Thank you all for listening and for letting us explain ourselves. And same thing, just let us know how we can help.
Thank you, Carlos, for participating. Thank you very much. Shama?
Yeah, so just repeating the same thing. So just saying that we are aware of the feedback, we hear the feedback, we actually enjoy getting it and trying to act upon it. So maybe even if it sometimes takes time, we're always trying to improve and to get better. So just keep the feedback coming, and then we'll do our best to answer your questions and your needs.
Thanks a lot, Shama. Olaf, your final opportunity to shamelessly plug something about Radio Liferay and Liferay University. You have to unmute yourself first.
There we are. I had a countdown to put up my lower third here, and then switched it on. So here's my final plug. Radio Liferay, the next episode is already in the can, and I'm waiting for the okay to publish it, as I commonly do with anybody who is on the podcast. And then we'll actually need to work on the infrastructure for Radio Liferay. The old Radio Liferay page will probably not really work anymore. So we'll need to find a new home for it. And if you go to university, if you want to see more of me, then just go to the OSGi basics lesson. If you want to have a flat rate on everything that we have in training for you, then go to passport.liferay.com, or actually better to get passport.liferay.com if you don't have it yet. And I don't know for how long, but for a little while we still have last year's price on, which is for the flat rate of everything that you can book in training, is still on a discounted price, which was meant to go away in the beginning of this year. Somehow it didn't. Well, just make use of it as long as it's there. I have no clue how long it will be there. But thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for all the questions. And yeah, I'm always happy to be somewhat involved with people who actually use Liferay and well, are happy to voice their critique, voice their questions, and communicate.
Thank you, Olaf. Thank you so much for participating here. Thank you, everyone, for this session. Typically, this is the time when I announce the next session, which is something that I'm not going to do tonight because I honestly don't have the next session planned yet. But here is the news. If you are the one who can be my guest in the next dev.life session, please get in touch with me. We made a promise when we started dev.life that this is going to be open for the community. We stick to that promise. The stage is not only for Liferay employees and developers. If you have something useful to share, if you have something that you want to tell us about or tell the community about, please do so. With that, I would like to thank everyone for watching today. Keep your questions coming. Let us know if the session was useful. Let us know if we should do another one like this. And I'll see you next time. Bye.